the configuration windows get a little large, and so I need as much screen real estate as I can get. If I go up here to Computer, you'll see that I have here on the D drive, I've already loaded up the VMware ISO file, the DVD media, and if I double-click this, it'll bring forward the VMware vCenter installer. So what you see here is effectively your standard installer tool that installs some of the products associated with vSphere 5. There's the server here, and the client, and the web client. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then some of the other functionalities that we're not going to work with now, but we will just a little bit down the road. I'm going to focus here on vCenter Server, and you'll notice that I have a couple of different prerequisites over here on the right-hand side. Microsoft.NET 3.5 SP1 and Windows Installer version 4.5. What's interesting, however, about both of these prerequisites, particularly atop Windows Server 2008 R2, which is the operating system that I'm running here, is that neither of these prerequisites are actually invoked or made use of from this location. If I try to install Windows Installer 4.5, you'll notice that the update is not applicable to the computer. And if you try to update Microsoft.NET 3.5 SP1, you'll get a little error message that reminds you that that functionality is actually installed as part of a Windows Server feature. In fact, if I go here to add features, you'll see the .NET Framework 3.5.1 features, which I've already installed. Important note here. If you go about installing .NET Framework 3.5, make sure that you install the top element here, but not the bottom involving WCF activation. Doing so will actually begin installing the IIS role, which will cause a little bit of a conflict later on as you go about installing the actual vCenter stuff. So you'll see here we have both of these prerequisites already installed onto this server. The next step in this process is actually to click the Install button and to begin the process of installing the stuff. So at this point, it's going to begin the installation here. It's going through all the Windows installer bits. I will actually pause this recording when we get through the long installation pieces so that you won't have to see, well, the not very fun part as it goes through installing all the pieces that it needs to. But what I do want to do is actually walk you through the installation so that you understand what sorts of screens you're going to be seeing as you go through that installation in your own environment. I'm going to click the Next button here on the initial screen, and you'll see I've got the end-user patent agreement that pops up, which requires another Next, and then the license agreement for another Next. You can put in your username here in an organization. I'll just copy the username down to the organization. And if you have a license key down here, you want to punch that license key down here at the bottom. Don't worry if you don't have that license key. If you don't enter one, it'll install vCenter Server in evaluation mode. And you can always go and add in a different license key at some point down the road. And in fact, inside of vCenter Server, there is a location where which you would add in a permanent license key at some point into the future. Now, as I mentioned, vCenter Server does require a database. You can select any of the available databases that VMware supports, whether it be SQL, Oracle, or what have you. If you have a small environment, or if you're planning on a small-scale deployment with a single-digit number of ESX hosts, it's perfectly normal for you to install SQL Server 2008 Express, and in this case, I'm going to be doing that. If you do use an existing supported database, be aware that you're going to have to create a 64-bit system DSN and not a 32-bit system DSN for connecting into that database. Just because it's simpler at this point, we're going to choose the top button here and install the SQL Server 2008 Express instance. We're going to use a system account here with a fully qualified domain name of vc.company.pri. I'm going to choose the Next button again and select the defaults here for where to install the vCenter Server components as well as the inventory service components. And then the Next button here brings me to whether or not I want to create this as a standalone vCenter instance or if I wanted to join it to an existing vCenter Server group. Now, we haven't spent much time yet talking about linked mode, but what you need to be aware of is that it is possible for you to install multiple vCenter servers into a configuration where they actually connect with each other in a linked mode. Now, doing so is something that you would do actually at this point in the installation. We have in this environment only a single vCenter server, and so we're going to create a standalone vCenter Server instance. But if I had multiple different servers